But good afternoon, everybody. Hello. Thank you for having me. And I think every time I come for these interactions, as I think previous speaker alluded to, it's selfishly a learning experience for myself. So that's why I'm here. But I think the personal bit is that I've been working now for over 24 years, and in 24 years, I have had the good fortune of being across three continents. I have probably been across 50 countries, sometimes on work, sometimes on pleasure, but nevertheless, across different cultures, which kind of, in a way, molded my perspective. A little secret about my family. So, if you meet them, my children, my daughter has got this really weird American accent. I hope she's not listening to this anywhere because that's going to have serious consequences for me, and it's American twang. My son, because he was brought up in England, is very, very British. And as you can figure out, that my husband and I are yet very native Indian in the way we behave or talk. So very often when we're on the airports or we're together in a country, there are like three different accents on the table. And often when my children were really young, people used to think I've kidnapped somebody else's children on the airport. And they used to look at me really suspiciously. But I think as a family, through the exposure and the experience which we've had, we really become a global citizen. And very often, when people ask my children, where do you come from? I really don't think they have an answer. And they just say, we're probably children of the world because we were born here, but we were brought up here. This is where we did our schooling. This is where we're doing our college. And we don't know where life takes us next. But wherever it will be, I'm sure it will be beautiful. And I think why this is relevant is because when I was growing up, probably like many other friends of mine, I was brought up in a slightly different environment. I loved painting. And I used to get really excited when I used to see colors and crayons and paints and I would love drawing caricatures. And every time I would draw a caricature and I was asked a teacher or a friend, how do I, what color should be the skin? And they would say, take a little white and take a little pink and take a little brown, and that's the color of the skin. And it was one of those points where I was to look at my hand and say, I'm brown, this is pink, this doesn't really work out for me. But it was ingrained in me that the color of the skin is this wheatish, whitish, pinkish. That's supposed to be the color of the skin. And if that's not your color of the skin, I wasn't sure how I was supposed to react. I had toys like many of you, and Barbie dolls were just coming into India when I was growing up. Beautiful dolls, golden hair, fair, white. That's how beautiful dolls look like. Have you ever seen a black doll? Ever? No, I know there are brown Barbies now, but in my time there were no black dolls. There were no brown dolls. So if it has to be a beautiful doll to play with, it has to be white. So I think, unconsciously that instills in children, and at least when I was growing up, and I'm sure many others like me, that there is a certain privilege to white skin. And that's how the world is supposed to be. We are not born thinking that white is good and black is bad and brown is confused. We are taught that. We are taught that in different ways and through different exposure that we receive very early in life. So imagine, with all this, I went through my education and I enter work. And I'm sure a lot of you are, in your final year and thinking about going overseas. I kind of started getting cross-country exposure when I actually started working. And I think a couple of things that stood out for me when I went to, say, Singapore. The culture in Singapore is very different, much more quieter than Indians. And I learned that there is a message in the silence. When I went to New York, it's much more, in a way, I think I always laugh and say, New York is like a bit like Mumbai on steroids, but it's much more pacey, much more action-oriented, even though it's predominantly white. When I went to Europe, culturally very different, consensus building, a mix of silence, a mix of bias of action, predominantly white. And I think as a brown, Asian female, it was an experience of evolution and learning for me. I remember once I was in one of these overseas offices, in UK and US, and my team got something wrong on a particular project. And there was this British Australian lady who walked into my room. And when there is somebody who doesn't like you and you don't really understand why they don't like you because you haven't had enough interaction, but you get the vibes. We're all humans. We understand, the non-verbal communication. So I had this bit of a intuition and this relationship with this person. Anyway, this project went wrong, and she walked into my room and she started shouting at the top of her voice and said, "Hey, this is really bad, and this shouldn't have happened like this, and blah, blah, blah." And I was taken aback, and I said, "Please sit down, because culturally or otherwise you don't do that in the West." And she said, "No, I don't want to sit down. You guys just don't understand how you kind of do this stuff, and I'm really upset." So I waited for 5-7 minutes, and then finally I got up and I said, "Will you leave my room?" Because I really did not like the way I was being treated for no fault of mine, or not being, and I felt quite unheard. Even if something's gone wrong, we could have a civil conversation and try and resolve it. Anyway, this was in a floor where there were 100 people, so I kind of felt a little humiliated that I was being spoken to quite rudely in front of 100 people by somebody, who's probably a local and perhaps may not have had enough experience or exposure to somebody who's quite different like myself. It was the first time in my life I picked up the phone and called up our boss. We used to work for the same person, and said, "Hey, this happened and I'm really upset." And he said, "Well, I understand, and how can I help?" And I said, "Well, I just need one answer, and a really honest answer. If I did the same to her, what do you think she would do?" And John was very, very honest, and he said, "She would bring a legal case on the bank." So I said, "Now, will you speak to her, or should I call my lawyer?" And I think that's an important lesson, because it's about tolerance. It's about tolerance and having a relationship of equality. When we talk about color or race, because it's so ingrained as a part of socialization, we treat it as quite normal, actually. And I often say racism is normalized. There is a white privilege, there is a confusion with the brown people, and there is the black slavery. It is just normal. Often at workplace, when we talk about does color really matter, it's a very difficult topic, because the moment you bring up the subject of racism or color, you're trouble. And so nobody really wants to talk to you about it, and it's like, oh my God, you're going into territory where this could get a little murky, so you must be trouble. We, unlike other strands of diversity like gender or LGBT or disability, we yet don't talk about racism enough, even though the world turmoil is leading to debates on racism, immigration, larger geopolitical issue, and the core of these issues is how humans are just simply different, they behave differently, they look differently, they may have different beliefs, which is not to say they're wrong, they're just different. So I think, I can narrate a number of stories, but the one I think, which is another one which is core to my heart, which probably was an experience which, in a way, brought my kids into the consciousness that they might have been different, is when we were doing a holiday in Europe, in a country. And we had a really beautiful holiday in the Alps, and we went to check out of the hotel, and the hotel manager, gave us the bill. My husband looked at the bill, and the bill was, there were some charges which we didn't recognize. So we turned around and said, "Hey, can you just check if this is okay?" And he just very rudely looked at my husband and said, "You Indians, you're always looking for a bargain, right?" Now, that is a perception or a thought this person may be holding, but obviously I found it quite inappropriate. And since Sandeep is not here, I can say I'm the more reactive one. So I'm like, "Hey, you can't talk to us like that." And he's like, why can't I? You are in my country, and you go back to India. And at that point of time, I had this really a mixed emotion of anger, of disappointment, and a feeling of saying, "Oh, how ignorant are you?" But the problem I had, which was less my emotions, it was my children who were witnessing this and saying, hey mom, maybe we are slightly different. And what is so different about it? We of course resolved the issue because, after that I went and complained and, we got it sorted. But I think it's these little interactions. There's nothing which big needs to happen for somebody to be felt or hurt or bruised because their color or their skin color is different. And I think for me, as I've gone through these experiences across the country, I also feel in India, there are views about skin color, and I'm not going to go into the Fair and Lovely ad and, some of the other debates which have taken place in the market. But if you think about, how we as Asians or Indians react to blacks. I mean, the color black is a few shades darker than most of the Indians are, but the way we react to it. I had a friend, John, who was actually an engineer working with a builder in Gurgaon. And if you remember, a couple of, or maybe a year back, there was this whole thing about the drugs which was going out in the newspaper. This poor fellow, he loved India, but I think one day he's walking to his office and there's a bunch of people who obviously have read this press release, started looking at John in a very suspicious way. And as he obviously got scared and he started walking faster, they thought he was suspicious, so they started following him. And before he could get into the office, they were pelting stones at him. It's just that he got salvaged by passers-by. So I think to really experience how color matters, you need to look at it from the eyes of the minority because the rules are never visible to the majority. So as much as we may be subjected to it, but I think what we need to think about is, are we subjecting somebody else to it? Caste system is a big debate, and I really don't want to start that here because that will take obviously another session to talk about, but that's a big projection of how racism is at work at grassroots levels in India. I think some of the lessons as you enter the world of globality with your education journey, what can help? In my head, it's like 3 C's: connect, communicate, get to engage with people, don't judge them. And the more you engage, the more you get to know them, the more they get to know you, the barriers break. Some of my best friends are Europeans. Some of my best mentors are Americans. But we reached a point where the relationship was beyond color. So connect, and I cannot overemphasize the importance of engagement and communication. Be curious. If you find somebody who's different than you are, be curious about what they are like. As I said, being different is not bad, it's not wrong. Just understand somebody else's perspective. Even in a family, people have different viewpoints, they react differently. We don't judge them. Just because somebody looks differently, and we have read in a book, or my auntie told me this, or my friend told me this, let's not again prejudge them. So remain curious about what's really going on. Every time I kind of enter a new country, I go to a local food restaurant, I will go and talk to somebody who's at the desk and figuring out what's really going on, because that's really how you understand human beings who are dramatically different than you are. And the third one, which underlines all of it, is compassion. Start with a position of compassion, of love, because I think love is so strong that it will have the power to break all the barriers. When I think about color, it really reminds me of a bouquet of flowers where there are different flowers of different colors. But together is, in that togetherness is the beauty of that bouquet, which attracts any passerby who is, wanting to experience the joy of different colors. And I wonder if, as humans, with different colors, we can be that bouquet and spread the joy, spread the fragrance. We can be what color we can be, where we be white, black, brown, but when you get that bruise or the cut, the color underlying that skin is red. So it really doesn't matter what is encompassing your body. And I'd just like to end, it's my favorite quote from Martin Luther King on, there is a future where, people will be judged not by the color of their skin, but hopefully content of their character. And I wish you all the best as you step into the world. Focus on building values, focus on building your character, because that's what will make you a global citizen. Thank you, and all the best.